Republicans in South Dakota have drafted a bill which amounts to a proverbial middle finger towards Joe Biden's use of executive orders during his opening weeks as president. Joe Biden has made extensive use of the executive order, actually rivaling the top contenders for the most executive orders in the first month of their presidency in his opening 2 weeks. We'll look at that in just a second, but this bill aims to stop the implementation of those orders in South Dakota when the Attorney General deems them to be unconstitutional. And there's a little process involved in that. Now, how successful will a bill like this be? Can South Dakota reject the executive orders of a president? Well, kind of. And we're going to talk about how. But why am I talking about this? Well, hey, I'm Nick Ricada of Ricada Law, a small law firm in central Minnesota. I'm a lawyer and a legal and political commentator here on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any videos if you like news, opinion, analysis, and commentary about legal and political subjects. All right? That being said, let's get back into this. So the idea of this bill is to stop the extensive use of executive orders, or at least stop their effects in South Dakota. And states can actually do this, and this is a pretty interesting way to go about it. Okay? Let's look at how many orders Joe Biden has actually issued. In his first 2 weeks, Joe Biden has issued 28 executive orders. All right, the rest of the people on the chart are in their first month of presidency. So Joe Biden is only halfway there. Now, the top contender is FDR, which shouldn't really surprise anyone. FDR basically ran this country in many ways like a dictator, largely because of the Great Depression, and then what ended up following was, of course, World War II. It was a little bit of a different time, but FDR does deserve some criticism. His use of executive power and his use of executive authority was almost, or has been almost unrivaled since, and it has laid the groundwork for many things that people who are proponents of federalism and liberty, like me, for example, want to avoid in a president. That being said, Joe Biden is only too short, and he has 2 weeks to go. Now, the interesting thing about executive orders, presidents, and the media is when a Democrat rules by executive order, the media often recovers it as if it were a glowing sort of praise of their bold uses of their executive authority to set right the wrongs of history. When a Republican does it, it is almost always covered as autocratic rule by fiat in a dictatorial manner. And of course, this is just what we come to expect from the media. But the reality is Joe Biden is trying to undo what he perceives as the ills of President Donald Trump, and he cannot wait for that pesky thing like the lawmaking power of Congress implemented by the Constitution. He must rule by executive order to get it done immediately. Now, of course, that doesn't extend to getting COVID relief checks that were promised out, or a hike in the minimum wage, or really any of the promises that he sold to Black Lives Matter or Antifa when in their useful idiot crusade to riot in the streets for the entirety of 2020. None of that is actually happening. What is happening is stuff like rejoining the Paris Accords and other nonsensical things that we were better off without, in my opinion. But that is my opinion. Let's get back to this bill. So let's talk about the 6 categories of executive orders that South Dakota is prepared to resist. They are, first, orders that must be determined to be unconstitutional by the Attorney General. So once the Attorney General determines that these are unconstitutional, the next step is to determine whether or not they want to actually take a litigation action against them, whether or not they should bring suit and sue the federal government. And if you want to see how this works, look no further than Texas, where Ken Paxton made an absolute joy of suing the Obama administration and looks to be doing the same with the Biden administration. States can sue the federal government over what they determine to be unconstitutional orders for any number of reasons. So once the Attorney General of South Dakota determines that an executive order is unconstitutional, and determines that they would like to take a litigation approach to suing the federal government and overturning the executive order, they will not, this bill, I should say, if passed as a law, would prevent South Dakota from implementing those executive orders in the state. All right. And the orders that it would prevent are related to a pandemic or other public health emergency, something Joe Biden is furiously looking at with executive orders. The regulation of natural resources. Of course, South Dakota is a resource-rich state, and there are all sorts of issues here, including oil, and something like the Dakota Access Pipeline might be considered with this as well. As you know, or may not know, Joe Biden completely undid the Dakota Access Pipeline as one of his first priorities as president. The regulation of the agricultural industry, something Midwest states just simply cannot afford. The regulation of land use, the regulation of the financial sector through the imposition of environmental, social, or governance standards. So this is going to apply to the executive action to rejoin the Paris Accords and other actions involving global warming type issues. And then finally, the regulation of the constitutional right to keep and bear arms. South Dakota is a gun-friendly state with a gun-friendly governor and a gun-friendly legislature and a very gun-friendly populace. And let me tell you, Midwesterners, even in blue states like Minnesota, are not happy with the prospects of having their Second Amendment rights curtailed. And this is something that Joe Biden is already leaning heavily into. So South Dakota is setting itself up as sort of a sanctuary against these sort of actions. Now, how effective is this? Well, by nature of the operation, this is extremely effective, okay? Because if the president issues an executive order and a state refuses to implement it, the only thing the president can really do is sue the state to force them to implement it. But you've now got a power of dueling legal bodies. This is our federal government at play, or our federalist government at play. There is a separation of power between the states and the federal government, and who has the right to actually enforce laws is always a question up for discussion. And that discussion takes place in court, and it tends to take a very long time. And these are the advantages that states have in refusing to implement policies of presidents. Now, whether or not you agree with South Dakota is irrelevant. They can go ahead and refuse to implement it, and they can sue the government and say that the orders are unconstitutional. And until they get an actual ruling that it is constitutional, they don't have to do anything. And even after that, they can still resist the implementation, and the federal government would have to pursue some measure to go ahead and force them to implement it, either through the courts or through something else like a restriction of funding or something like that. But the long and short is states do have a lot of power to resist these sorts of moves, and South Dakota seems poised to do that. Hopefully other red states will go ahead and follow suit. At least that's what I would like to see, because I would like to see resistance to this executive action. Look, if you want to pass laws, pass them through the Congress. You have the Democrats in the House, you have the Democrats in the Senate. Go ahead and pass the laws. Put everybody's name down on paper to this bad stuff, not just a senile old man. That's my opinion. Hopefully you have some too. Drop them down in the comments below and let me know. We'll talk soon. Peace. Peace.